Hey guys, welcome to Made by Britzy, episode number 1. I am Brittany, and this is my podcast about knitting, sewing, and all the crafty things. You can find me on Instagram and Ravelry at Made by Britzy. If you need to get in touch with me, message me on Instagram. I'm so happy to be here with you guys talking about the things that I love to talk about. But before we get into the crafty stuff, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Brittany Siegel. I live here in Austin, Texas with my husband Dave and our cat Slayer. We just moved here from Boston and we've been here for about 4 months now. I grew up in Texas and I met Dave here about 6 years ago, and I did what girls in love do, and I moved across country to be with him in Boston. We were there for about 5 years, and we just moved back to be a little closer to my family. So to tell you a little bit about my creative background, I've always been a little bit crafty, and I enjoyed making things even when I was little. But when I was about 20, so about 13 years ago, that's when I started knitting. My mom and I went to a Hobby Lobby here, which is just a craft store, and they had this teach yourself to knit kit, and it was basically just a piece of mesh fabric, the length of a scarf, and you were supposed to weave the yarn in and out of the squares. So it wasn't really knitting, which was a little disappointing. And my roommate at the time had a book, and a knitting book, and yarn and some needles, and she said, "Do you want this?" And so I took that, and in the back it had a small section for left-handed knitters, and I'm left-handed, so I used that book and I taught myself to knit, and I haven't stopped since. I'd say about 5 years ago, when I moved to Boston, was when I really got into the nitty-gritty of knitting. I started knitting mittens and scarves and shawls and hats and garments, things that I didn't really have a need for in Texas. But yeah, Boston kind of opened me up to a different world of knitting. So it'll be interesting to see how I can adapt my knitting to the warmer weather here in Texas, but I'm excited. I'm sure there are knitted crop tops in my future, probably some little cropped sweaters. So yeah, we'll see. So as far as sewing goes, my grandma, or my nanny on my dad's side, is the seamstress in the family, and she taught me the basics. We started off making like aprons and pillows and, just simple projects like that. And about 4 years ago, I saw my friend Kelly at a 4th of July party. Kelly has an Etsy shop called I'm Your Present, and she makes funky acrylic jewelry and like awesome dresses that she makes herself, which is really cool. So you should check her shop out. But she had on this dress that she had made herself, and what was so cool about it was the fabric. I think it was called Abraham Lincoln, and it was a fabric that I think she had gotten at Joann's, but it was basically, in the 4th of July theme. It was these shirtless, muscular soldiers, and on this fabric, and it was just so cool. And I hadn't realized at that point that I could get fabric like that. And it just really opened a whole new world of possibilities for me. And yeah, she really, I think, encouraged me to make my first dress, and I haven't stopped since. So I've always had a hard time finding things in stores that fit me because I am petite. I'm about 5 feet tall, and my top half is much smaller than my bottom half. So yeah, I've always struggled to find things that fit me the way they should, and I know a lot of women can relate. So once I realized that I could make things that I liked that fit me well, I was hooked. And sewing really helped me define my style. I've always leaned more towards a vintage style, but I've never really, was able to find things that fit me, or, they can be very expensive online if you're buying like the pinup or vintage style dresses. So yeah, once I, made my first dress and it fit fairly well, I just did not stop after that. Now I have a ton of vintage patterns. I use my grandma's first sewing machine that she gave to me. It's from 1960, and it was a gift to her from my grandpa shortly after they got married. And I love using her machine with the vintage patterns, and it's just so nice to feel like I'm using something that was a big part of my dad and my aunt's childhood. So the first segment of the episode will be what I'm wearing. And if you follow me on Instagram, you would have already seen this, but I'll go over it real quick. So the top is the Astoria pattern by Seamwork. It's just a simple cropped sweater, a really easy make. I did make one modification, and that was to take off the band at the bottom. So I just did a simple hem. It's a really quick sew, and it's very versatile. I wear this a lot. I've made this several times, and I've gotten a lot of wear out of all of them. But this fabric is from Fabric Place Basement in Boston, which is one of my favorite fabric stores to shop at. It's basically just a huge basement full of fabric. Yeah, and I love this print. I think I got about 6 yards, not knowing what I was going to make yet, but I knew I would find something to do with it. And it's super comfortable, really stretchy, thick knit, and it's basically like wearing classy pajamas. The skirt is just a straight skirt that I made. I'll either insert pictures here, or you can look on my Instagram and see a full-length view, because it's going to be hard to show on camera. But yeah, it's just a straight pencil skirt. I tried to use the patterns for Pirates pencil skirt pattern, but I was having a hard time getting the fit right. So I decided to just make my own pattern, which I basically took a mini skirt that I had. I think I got this from Forever 21 a while back, and it's just like a really stretchy mini skirt that I wear over leggings, but it fits me really well. It's got about a 4-inch waistband, I believe. So yeah, I just put this on tracing paper and traced around it, and then I lengthened it to below my knees and tapered it. And I started off making it a little bigger than I think it needs to be. That way I can put it on and make adjustments as needed. And yeah, this is such an easy make because there's no zipper. The fabric is stretchy enough that I can just pull it on. And I also made a circle skirt to match, so basically the same thing, just about a 4-inch waistband on the skirt, and just a circle skirt attached. So all 3 pieces were really easy to make: the top, the pencil skirt, and the circle skirt. And I can mix and match. I have other circle skirts and tops that go with both pieces. So I've gotten a lot of wear out of just these few items, and yeah, it's great. I love when I can make multiple outfits out of a couple of pieces. So next up, I want to talk about my whips, or works in progress. So the first thing I have to show you is something that I'm sure you guys have either seen or made yourselves, and it's the Find Your Fade shawl by Andrea Mowry. This is living in a bag that I actually made myself. I originally had it in a much smaller bag, but as this thing has grown and grown and grown, I needed something a little bigger. And this still is not big enough. It's almost done. Otherwise, I'd have to find somewhere else to put it because I almost can't get the bag zipped. But this is a shawl that fades. I use 7 different colors, and each color fades into the next. So I'm on the 7th color. And I am so glad to be almost done with this. I started this in July of last year when we were on a cruise, and I've by no means been monogamous, but I did definitely expect to have this done by now. But at this point, there's so many stitches on the needles, and this thing is so huge. It's gotten heavy to knit, and I honestly, I can only do a few rows at a time before I just have to move on to something else. So I'm trying to put in a few rows every day and finish this thing up. But without further ado, let me show you the ginormous shawl. If I can get it untangled. Okay. So yeah. So this is where I'm at now. Sorry, it's really big and awkward. This dark red is my 7th color. So yeah, it just goes on and on and on. Yeah, so this thing is almost taller than me. When I'm done, I'll take pictures and post them. But yeah, I think it will be great to have, we still have a little bit of winter left, even though in Austin it's much more mild. But I think I'll still get a lot of wear out of this. And it should be done before the end of this month, because my goal for January was to finish up all my knitting projects so that I can start with a clean slate next month. So yeah, I'd say by the end of the week, I should have this done, and I'll take pictures and show you guys. And once it's done, I'll go over all the yarns that I used. So I will talk about one of them right now, which is my original plan was to dye all of the yarn for this shawl. But I realized I was probably in over my head because I did just start experimenting with dyeing. But I did use one color that I dyed, which is this one right here, which I really love. It's just kind of like a dusty pink background with speckles of teal, dark blue, purple, hot pink, and I really love the way it turned out. It was one of the first skeins I dyed, and it was just a mini skein, so I didn't have enough to actually properly finish the section that the pattern calls for, so I did make do, and I just started my next color early. And if you're not familiar with this pattern, you do a fade from one color to the next, and I didn't have enough to do the fade the way you're supposed to, but it's fine. I think once it's done, you won't be able to tell. And I think it looks great either way. And I learned a lesson, which is to weigh your yarn, which I never ever do. But yeah, now I know, because this actually happened to me with a few colors in this project. I didn't have enough yarn to complete the section. But it's fine. Yeah, and next time I will weigh my yarn. So the next project that I want to talk about is the Desh Chain Sweater, which is a pattern by Layla Robbie. And it's kind of a boxy crop sweater, which isn't a style that I would normally go for. But I really love this lace panel in the front. I think this will be something that I'll get a lot of wear out of because it is cropped. So for winter, I can layer it over other pieces, and then in the summer, I can just wear a little bralette underneath, and I think it'll be a nice, kind of lightweight sweater, because it is, although the yarn is Aran weight and it is a thicker fabric, it's really drapey and kind of a loose knit, which I think will be great for spring. So far, I have the front and the back knit. The back is just plain stockinette stitch. And I've got the shoulders seamed, and I just have to finish up seaming the sides, and then I'll knit the sleeves, which shouldn't take long because, like I said, this is an Aran weight yarn, so it's a little thicker than what I'm used to working with, and it is knitting up really quickly. The only reason it's not done yet is because I hate seaming, and I have to seam the sides before I can start on the sleeves. But again, I'm gonna try to have this done by the end of this month. And the recommended yarn is Quince & Co. Kestrel, which my local yarn shop does not stock, but they did have something similar, which is this Barocco Elba. It's a 100% cotton yarn, and it's an Aran weight. It doesn't have a colorway name, but the color number is 7740. At my yarn shop, I bought 4 balls, which is what the pattern recommended, but I ended up doing an extra repeat on the lace. So I did realize that I was going to run out of yarn, and I went back to get more, but my yarn shop was sold out, so I was able to order this on Webs. And it's actually a very affordable yarn. This was on sale for $8, but I think typically it's not much more than that. I think on Webs it was maybe like 10 or something like that, but definitely very affordable. And I really like the fabric that it's making. It's like the colors is kind of a dark green, and some of it's like a marled yarn almost. Yeah, it's really cool. It's my first time knitting with something like this, and I really just love the way it's knitting up. So next I want to talk about my finished objects, which I have 2 for you today. And they're both socks, which is surprising because I'd say about 6 months ago, I thought that I would never knit socks, but now I've been converted to a sock knitter. And I say that because I've never really been much of a sock wearing person. I'm normally in sandals or barefoot, and I'm not one to wear socks around the house or to bed. But I knitted my first pair, and I'm hooked because hand knit socks are just, they feel really great on your feet. I feel like they keep your feet the perfect temperature, and yeah, they're just such a quick knit, and they're fun. And at this point, I always have a pair of socks on the needles. So the first pair was actually supposed to be my Christmas socks, which they weren't finished in time for Christmas, but that's okay. I really got into the Christmas spirit this year, and I made a bag to keep them in, a Christmas bag with a plaid lining and a pom-pom. And I dyed up some yarn to match my Christmas tree. I was really inspired by my Christmas tree this year. I had a lot of fun, and I basically covered it in pom-poms and trim and sewing notions and crazy ornaments. It's just covered in everything, and it's really colorful and really bright. And I kind of did something different than the normal, like, traditional Christmas tree that I do, but I'm really loving it this year. It's still up. I haven't taken it down. But yeah, I was so inspired that I dyed up this yarn, which is just the Stroll Glimmer yarn from Knit Picks. So it comes like this, and it is 70% fine superwash merino wool, 25% nylon, and 5% stellina. So it's got sparkles, which normally I'm not into, but for Christmas I thought, why not? And I dyed it up with, it's like a light mint background, and then I did just about every color speckle you could imagine. There is a lot of sparkle in here, which I really like. It's probably not showing up on camera, but I'll try to take some pictures and post them on Instagram. So This is the finished sock. The pattern I use is the V-Sock pattern by Brandy Velton. It's got a really cool stitch called the V-stitch, and it makes for a really cozy fabric, which is great for this time of year. I did have some difficulty with the stitch because it requires you to like make a V-stitch, which is you're dipping down into a center stitch below and pulling up a loop of yarn, and then knitting a few stitches, and then pulling up another loop angled, the opposite way. So I had some trouble dipping down into the middle stitch without losing the stitches that were already on my needle. So my solution was to use a crochet hook and to use the hook to pull the thread up through, to pull the yarn up through the stitch to put it on the needle. And that ended up working out really well. And once I kind of got in the rhythm, it went really quickly. I did also have a problem with not gauge, but I guess the size needle that the pattern calls for, I think it's a 0, but I felt like it was going to be really loose. I ended up just going with it. I think I tried several sizes of needles, and I think the stitch, because it is a thicker stitch, it's not a super tight sock, at least on me. But I really liked the way that it turned out. Then they're not as long as I normally would knit my socks, but I like it. And again, they knit up really quick. For the toe, I used just the Madeline Tosh yarn that I had left over for the toe and the heel. And for the heel, I used Fish Lips Kiss Heel for the first time, and actually really love this heel. It fits really well. There's no gap in the corners, which was great. I know a lot of people are intimidated by the Fish Lips Kiss Heel pattern, but because it's a super long pattern, but you really only need, there's like a page in the middle that basically gives you the directions for the heel. And I just knit it. I didn't do any measuring, or I didn't trace my foot or anything like it recommends. I just knitted the heel, and it worked out perfectly. It fits really well, and I think that's gonna be my go-to heel from now on. I'm not sure if I would knit this sock pattern again, mainly just because I didn't enjoy making the V-stitch, as much. I tend to stick towards plain vanilla socks, just patterned socks. I start off strong, and then I usually get second sock syndrome. But I am really glad that I finished these. I think I'll get a lot of wear out of them. And it's just a really... Sorry, I haven't even actually showed you. I don't have any sock blockers yet. I never block socks, and I should probably get some. But yeah, that's the finished sock. And another thing, I knit these on, I tried double pointed needles. I tried the Magic Loop, which is normally not my go-to. I've been knitting on 9-inch circulars, which I know a lot of people don't like. But for me, I feel like I can knit socks so quickly on 9-inch circulars, and especially these, making the V-stitch, it was kind of fiddly on the DPNs and on the Magic, using Magic Loop. So for the most part, I did use 9-inch circulars for these, and it worked out really well, at least for this pattern. So for my second finished object, I have a pair of socks that I knitted for Dave. Well, there's 2. And I knit these on 9-inch circulars. Again, this is a 1.5, 2.5 millimeter, and they're Chiagus, which I really love these. I was using Hiya Sharps, and I do like those too. But I was finding that I was splitting my yarn, and the tips on these aren't quite as pointy, and I really love knitting with these, and I really like the cord, which a lot of people have raved about, and Chiagus are great. I used just the vanilla socks pattern, I think probably like the medium size, which I think is a 64 stitch count, and I did probably about 1.5 inches on the cuff, just 1x1 rib. And the yarn I used was great. It's the Patons Kroy sock yarn, and it's 75% superwash wool and 25% nylon, and it's in the blue striped rag colorway. So I think this is a very popular colorway because I got one ball of this at Joann's on a whim because Dave had been asking for stripy socks and I had just never gotten around to it. So they had one ball, so I got this thinking, I'm in Joann's fairly often, so just thought I'd pick up another ball at some point. Well, I kept looking and they never had it in stock. They were always out. Well, I finished the first sock and Christmas was coming up, so I ended up finding a second ball on Amazon, which was great because they have like all the colorways in this yarn, and I'll definitely be knitting more with this yarn. And it was a little more expensive, but honestly, when I'm not able to find it anywhere else and I can get it in 2 days, we have Amazon Prime. You can't beat that. So, it came in, I finished the second sock, and I love this yarn because it was, I didn't have to measure or anything. I mean, I guess with all stripy socks, but I just did 2 repeats of the stripes for the leg, and then I did almost 2 full repeats for the foot. So it was so nice just knitting the second sock. I just, did the same thing, and they, I didn't have to measure or anything, and they matched up almost perfectly. There's one row at the top where it's not matched up, but honestly, you can't even tell, and I think these are just adorable, and Dave loves them. He wore them for about a week straight. They were a Christmas present, which I know sounds kind of lame to get socks for Christmas, but I got him other stuff, and he loves these. So he did throw these in the washing machine, and they turned out fine. They didn't felt or anything. They are maybe a little more rough, but that's fine. They're guys' socks, and if anything, it just made them more sturdy. Next time, I think I'll make a point to separate our hand-knitted socks since our collection is growing, and I'll put them in one of those bags and put them on a delicate cycle, and I think that will be fine. But I've gotten over my fear of machine washing socks now, which is a big step for me. So we've come to the end of the episode, and although I could talk about this stuff forever, since it is episode number 1, I'll keep it kind of short. So big plans for the future. I hope to be able to put a podcast out for you guys every 2 weeks is what I'm going to aim for. And we'll have a lot of fun stuff going on. I'm hoping to do a segment called Dave Picks, where I let him dive into my fabric stash, and he can pick whatever fabric he wants, and I have to make something from it. I think that's going to be good because my fabric stash is kind of embarrassing. When we moved, we had everything in a pod, and my craft room stuff took up a lot of space. And he's a musician, and his music room stuff also took up a good amount of space. I mean, I think he has like 16 guitars or something crazy. So my knitting stuff was in good company. But anyway, I do have a problem only picking my favorites from my stash, which I do like everything I have in my fabric stash, or I like it, or I did like it at some point, and I'll probably like it again. But I have a bad habit of, picking my favorites and not really using up what I have. So I'm hoping that by letting him pick, I'll be forced to kind of think outside the box and maybe use something I wasn't expecting to use, or make a pattern that I wasn't expecting to make. yeah, so I think that'll be really fun. And he's always interested to see what I come up with. And so it'll be nice to get him kind of involved in the making process. And yeah, so I'm going to try to do that and have some other segments like maybe showing off my vintage sewing notions or like vintage knitting things. Yeah, so we'll see. The wheels are turning. Who knows what will be on the next episode. You'll just have to check it out. But for now, this is the end, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.